Hello, I'm Dr. Yanya Lalich. It's likely that many of you know who I am, and for those who don't, I was in a political cult for about 10 years back in the 70s and 80s. About 5 years after I got out, I went on to grad school and got my PhD. I've been educating about cults and working with survivors and families for the past 35 years. And I must say, I was so honored to be asked by these panelists to introduce their topic tonight. My first real exposure to the whole issue of children born and raised in cults happened in around 2003 when I was at a conference and I met two young people who were raised in the Children of God. Yes, the Children of God, one of the most notorious and most abusive of all cults of all time. That meeting inspired me to do some research of my own, which was published in my book, Escaping Utopia. And then I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, Jemima and Whisper invited me to be on their podcast, Butterflies and Bravery. I got to know them even more because they participated in some of the courses and workshops that were offered through my nonprofit, the Lalich Center on Cults and Coercion. I know Maria not as well, only through some chats in the past year or so on LinkedIn. And unfortunately, I never met Joe, and so I don't know him personally. I believe so strongly in making appropriate resources available for the many, many individuals who are coming out of the cults that they were born or raised in. I have said many times that this is the number one public health issue that no one anywhere in any country is talking about or addressing the very real needs. Research like that being presented here today by these panelists is most certainly a step in the right direction. The world, and most especially mental health professionals and other professionals, need to understand the unique psychological and practical challenges faced by this growing population of survivors. So it is my joy and my honor to present to you Whisper, Jemima, Maria, and Joe, and their groundbreaking research. I love you all, and thank you.
So, firstly, I just wanted to say that none of us are professional speakers, and the subject matter is very it's emotionally charged, and it's something that's deeply personal. And for some of us, not me, but just speaking about some of these things openly and in public is something that is it's very difficult. It's one of the things that I wanted to put forward. So the Children of God, obviously, is briefly introduced, apocalyptic doomsday sex cult that is heavily abusive in all of the categories, which to me includes spiritual abuse, obviously sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, all at the same time. I think what I wanted to introduce, and I suppose where I see my value on a panel, this particular panel anyway, is to talk from a specifically male perspective. And I think, unfortunately, with the way that most men are, they're quite insular and they like to put their strength on the outside. And it's very difficult to break down and talk about the inner workings. And I suppose get to a level of emotional language that actually allows them to express the things that smack them about on the inside. So for me, one of the biggest things was the guilt. And essentially in the Children of God, it was a heavily misogynistic, sexually charged group. And we were basically groomed to be abusers. So I left the group personally with my family, escaped from India in 1987 and came back and was put into year 6 primary school in Canberra, the cleanest, crispest city that I reckon exists almost anywhere, heaps of roundabouts and zero rubbish. And from that point, I felt like it's a single line that I've used often a child soldier dropped into a teddy bear's picnic. I had a carnal knowledge that I should not have had at that point in time. I had extensive experience because even though the rules were at the age of 12, you know, is when most of the abuse was kind of brought into the open and openly accepted. It started well before that. So grooming, and I guess having 0 point of reference. So there was no life before. Yes, thankfully for me, there was a life after, but with no life before, when you get dropped out into the general public, there is no point of reference. So what, you know, we're finding is that not only is there a lack of emotional language that men struggle with, but then there's also the fact that they were taught the whole time that they were the, you know, to rule the women, that the women were there for them, that they couldn't be said no to, etc., etc. And that did go 2 ways, like, you know, and weren't allowed to say no to women either. But I guess there's those 2 things. So the feelings of guilt. And so just to put into context, I left when I was 11 and a half. And so this extensive experience came before the age of 12. And I suppose for me, that saying that, you know, give me a child until he is 7 and I will show you the man, it really is a messing with the foundations, with the building blocks, the cornerstones that make up who we are, how we identify as individuals, our sense of selves. So when that is disrupted at that early stage, you don't have tools to be able to move forward. It took decades, and even still to this point, concerted effort, which for me started at age 14, where I came up with strategies to deal with things slowly and one at a time. But one of the few things that refuses to leave is that sense of guilt. And it's things that happened, you know, that you were made to do, encouraged to do, just that, I suppose, being groomed to be an abuser. And I think that sets a lot of guys up when they leave to, I suppose, if they don't have the common sense about them, to actually put in the effort to rebuild their moral virginity and to take themselves back to ground zero and pick out the pieces, you know, one at a time, and deal with issues in a way that you don't become overwhelmed. You know, one of the strategies I had was imagining sitting in a green field with a hole in the middle, and I'd have my legs dangling in there, and I'd chuck the fishing rod in and pull out one item at a time, and I purposefully worked through the grief process with that particular item. And I could tell if I'd fallen in the hole. I gave myself a period of time to forgive myself for falling inside the hole, and then realised that I would get frustrated down here. And so I'd climb back out again, pick the rod up and keep fucking fishing. So it's just one of those things, though. That was purposeful. That was 15. I'm 48. And I think it's one of those things. The building blocks, the cornerstones, these things are you know, pretty brutal. And it attacked my my comfort around my sex drive as well, because obviously being a male and I'm a strong male, I had a great sense of guilt about having any drive at all. So that it sort of robbed the innocence that would come ordinarily with just being a normal male with normal male drives. Obviously, at the end of each day, I always try to look for positives. And what I had the chance to do at that point, because I did wipe the slate clean, is I was able to live intentionally. Because each thing that I knew and each piece I put there that I wanted was purposely put there. I knew how the brick felt, I knew how heavy. I could pick each one up and stand it up intentionally. So I don't believe that it's a lost cause, but they are the challenges that are faced as in a unique position without having a point of reference from a male perspective. Is there something else?
Yeah, that's great. Yes. Hello, everyone. I am Jemima. I was born in the Children of God cult at the age at the age, in 1972. I was one of the early children because, when the cult first started, they weren't even allowed to hold hands or sleep in the same rooms. Like they even had separate colonies for men and women. So my mother was pregnant when she joined, so she was instantly put into what they called the Seattle Widows Colony. It was basically all the pregnant women who'd left their husbands back in the system, as it was called. So I started traveling when I was 6 weeks old. My mom went off to pioneer Hawaii and Samoa for the children of God. It was a big go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature was a big part of their life and missives. And so I've been, this is my 23rd country that I've been in, and traveling was very normal from a very small age. And during the R&R, which was the reorganization, nationalization revolution that took place in 1978, 9, right around that time, a lot of people kind of went back to their homes where they had come from. Like we moved back into the house that my mom lived in when she was a child. And I went to public school for a very short time. I went to my second grade class. My grandmother was my teacher. And I announced to everyone that my daddy had rubbed my vagina. I think that really speaks to the normalcy of sex at a very young age. In the Children of God cult. And then that same summer, my stepfather spanked me so hard that I had bruises from my shoulders to my knees. And I was briefly taken away only for the summer and given to my grandparents. And my stepdad wasn't allowed to have any contact with me. My mother had to stay 6 feet away. But after the summer, they just gave me back. So then we started to travel a lot around the States. And at the age of 12, I was shipped off to Mexico. And from there on to Japan, the Philippines, India, Thailand, some of the most worst abusive colonies or homes, as they were called. So then when the charter came out, I decided that I wanted to go to Russia, and that's where I got pregnant. I was a bit of a late bloomer for that. I didn't get pregnant until I was 25. And I felt like I was really behind everybody else that was starting to have babies at 14 and 15 and 16. So I was like, well, I need to have a baby too. So I ended up being a single mother. And I actually didn't leave the cult. I was excommunicated for smoking pot. I call it my freedom weed now. And I was gonna go back after the excommunication, but then I met James Penn, who was one of the top leaders that lived in the home with Karen Zerbe and David Berg. They were basically like royalty. They called it the King and Queen's home, and that was also around that time is when I met Ricky. I had very shortly left the cult, and James Penn just came to me and said, oh, hey, I have a friend, and I should have put two and two together, but I didn't. He's like, hey, I have a friend that wants to leave the cult, can he come and stay at your house for a couple of weeks? Because he was going to go on some fishing boats up in Alaska, because it was a not easy, but a quick way to make a little bit of money, because you get paid like 10 to 30,000. So that was going to be how he started his life with his new wife, Alexia. So he came to my house, and for the first week, I had no idea who he was. He didn't tell me. He just said he was Ricky Rodriguez. And so I was just kind of going about my business, normal. One day I'm in the bathroom putting makeup on, and he comes to me and he's like, you don't know who I am, do you? And I'm like, no. He's like, I'm Davidito. And I was like, what? Oh my God, you should have told me. That's like having Prince Harry in my house. Like, oh my goodness. I would have cleaned, I would have cooked. he was like, that's why I didn't tell you. Because he just wanted to be normal. And he just wanted to be treated like a regular person, not like royalty, because that was how he was raised. He was groomed to be the next leader of the cult. And so he committed murder-suicide in 2005. That was a very difficult time for, I think, everybody that had been born into the Children of God cult, because that really showed that there was big problems at the root level that a lot of people just didn't know about and didn't understand. We had been very seriously lied to, told that they had to move all the time because of religious persecution, when in actuality it was because David Berg was wanted for all sorts of things. They got fake passports and fake names and changed their names every 6 months and moved countries, and James Penn was one of the ones that was in charge of doing all of that for them. So that's why he had that inside information. And one of the most heartbreaking things that I heard was that Karen Zerbe had $1,000 a week food budget for herself. While we were out on the mission field, starving, pregnant, malnourished, rationing cheese and milk. You know, you get 3 plums a day and 3 slices of cheese and half a cup of milk. So that was extremely angering to me when I heard that. And that's when I really felt like my whole life was a lie. Everything I'd ever been told or taught was just a complete lie. It's almost like you realize that you've been in a completely different world, a completely different universe than everybody else. And of course, they told us the world was evil, and if we left, we were going to get raped and murdered and be drug addicts and prostitutes. And to be fair, I was a drug addict for many years. I cycled through all the addictions, pills, meth, alcohol, cigarettes, shopping, eating, everything that I could do to take my mind off of my problems. So it wasn't really until a few years ago when Whisper and I started the podcast that I really started to come into myself and realize that I had value. That was a very difficult thing, and I think it still is for a lot of us. We fail to see our own value because of how much the cult tried to destroy us as people, and very much succeeded in many cases. So, that's my background. And
Hi, everyone. I'm Whisper. I was also born into and raised in the Children of God. I am actually the oldest of 11 known siblings, known to me at the time. I later was to find out I have 16 half siblings and I only have 2 full siblings, so a total of 18. I grew up like all of us without a home. We were moved more times than we could possibly count, more cities, more homes. There was never any place that we belonged. I've lived in 14 countries. You said yours, your 23rd. I think we all have similar counts like that. I was also separated from my parents when I was 12 and moved around from home to home. I experienced a lot of what we've all heard about it and everything that has been talked about as far as the amount of abuse, sexual and physical and spiritual, emotional, and all of those those fun things. But one of the things that that specifically affected me was that the way that the cult controlled women through controlling their reproduction and birth. I was forcibly partnered with a boy, and I use that term correctly because he was 17. I was forcibly partnered with a boy when I was 19, and 9 months later, we had our first kid, and within 6 years, I had 4 children. Sorry, and we experienced a lot of separation. One of the main, I guess, tools or control mechanisms in children God, as in most cults, is isolation, complete isolation from the outside world, cutting us off from relatives and any outside communication. So once I had started having children, things changed really dramatically for me. Of course, sorry. The first time I held my son, my oldest, it was the first time that, like, I understood unconditional love. And that was also one of the most confusing moments in my life, because I didn't understand. How my parents couldn't feel the way that I felt in that moment. But also, it made me very, very clear that I needed to get myself and this kid out of there. Obviously, that became problematic, considering that I ended up having 3 more. My husband was very happy in the cult. He was, by the time I had my 4th kid, he had been in a 3-year relationship with another woman, and was also having sexual relationships with many of the other women in the different homes that we had lived in. So he didn't have a motivation to go anywhere. But after a lot of pleading and fighting and threatening, I did convince him to leave. So we made an escape plan. I made an escape plan. We executed it. And so I had 4 kids, ages 7 and under, and $200. And that's how we started life for the first time outside of the cult. It was a very, very there was so much insurmountable almost challenges, just surviving and trying to figure things out. We were kids having kids. We didn't have any form of reference for even being parents, let alone how to live life. So my husband at the time was having his own challenges, and ended up the relationship ended up getting very abusive, and I went downhill very quickly, my mental health at the time. And eventually I was able to separate from my husband, but just like at the time living in the cult, I had no idea that there was any type of resources available for me. I had no idea that there were, that I could have reached out. I had no idea that there was any support systems, or I didn't even know that I had relatives that would have helped me in the situation. So I in a similar vein, I ended up without any child support or or alimony as a single mom again. And me and the kids went through a lot of life, a lot of years, that were very, very difficult. My kids ended up having, a lot of challenges themselves, my own, I guess, mental health struggles that were passed on to them. And that was, a very, very challenging time. And I almost lost one of my kids to mental health struggles. So it was a long road back, and after digging myself out of a lot of mess, and putting things back together in a very long, it was a very long road, and I did a lot of things wrong, made a lot of mistakes, a lot of things that I didn't know how to fix. But when, I finally started getting my head above water, that's when I came around to saying, I need to become the person that I needed. I didn't have anybody to turn to. I want to become that person that other people can turn to and answer their questions and tell them that there is things out there, that there are resources, that there are solutions, that there are answers. Starting the podcast Butterflies and Bravery was one of the first steps that I took towards that. And I yanked Jemima along with me for my crazy plan. But what happened is that we started hearing story after story. We wanted to create a platform for people to have their story told. Like they can own their own story. We weren't going to cut it up. We weren't going to change it. We weren't going to, make it, put it on the news or make it salutacious in any way. It was their story. They could tell it. And that was the start of a lot of changes. And eventually I got involved with the Lawlage Center with Jemima and ended up starting helping to facilitate support groups. And that sort of brought me to where I am today and where my life is now. Kids are good. And I'm a director of operations. I'm at an anti-trafficking nonprofit. And what?
Good for you. That's awesome.
So, and that's sort of been, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for having us. And yes, thank you, Whisper and Jemima, for inviting Joey and I along on this journey. We both were on your podcast as well. And that podcast has really been kind of the first time I think that people, like for maybe 10, 20, 30 years even, we've been playing these thoughts in our heads, thinking we're the only ones with all the struggles, and you guys have created a platform for people to share their stories in their way, and even the conversations that I've had now with my siblings and people now because of the podcast. I'm just really grateful, so thank you. And thank you. I'm gonna cry today. And when they told me it was in Barcelona, I was like, hell yeah. So yes, I'm very grateful. So I wanted to talk a bit about my story. Obviously, we can't talk about our whole lives because that would be a book. But I wanted to focus a little bit more on something that people don't talk much about in the news and articles, which was the medical neglect. And that's a huge part of most of our lives, and a big part of the things that we're dealing with today. So I'm currently a psychologist, and I have an organization. I work in the disability field, and that passion really has come from my own experiences with that. Jump to the next page. So let's put some pictures up. So, so my earliest memory is of my dad. And I was the seventh child born in 9 years to my mum, who was 28, and just to show you the chaos in it, and to several different dads, who knows how many. But my dad, his name was Peter Puppet in the group, and he was only 19 when he was recruited. He was a very talented young man, And my earliest memories were looking up at him and seeing this giant lump on his throat, from Hodgkin's lymphoma. And, this lump was literally strangling him to death. And, as a young 3-4-year-old, that's me on his lap there. You know, I could already see there's something really wrong. And, it was just the perverse doctrine of the cult that if you were sick or if your family members were sick, you were being punished. You were being judged. There was no love and empathy or care. And there was always that that push to show your faith and to show that you were all in. In his case, he was taking medicine for a short period of time and getting better. My granddad's actually a doctor, so I can't even imagine what it would be like to watch your son die of one of the most preventable, you know, treatable cancers. But he refused to even take Panadol. Like, that's where he was at, to show his full faith in God and the community. And the narcissism of David Berg, who said he would get better and became very angry because he wasn't getting better, kind of showing him up as a false prophet. So unfortunately, you can even Google if you want to go down a terrible rabbit hole. He was even in a lot of the different letters to the tens of thousands of people, 2,000 people at the time, of him rebuking him and shunning him. And he left, he ended up dying alone, without his spiritual family that he'd given up everything for. Which is heartbreaking to think of, such a young man with all the potential. So this led me, you know, to a life, we weren't allowed to be sad that he had died as well, and so grief allowed. We even had to burn all his photos and work with art and everything. So there was just this, obviously it was just a very young child, but this kind of, this ugly sort of shunning that was going on, that somehow we were supposed to be getting punished by God. So this kind of led to a life of that, I suppose. That's kind of the earliest programming. None of us were vaccinated, so we had measles, mumps, chickenpox, and malaria several times. I was actually legally blind and I never got glasses, so I always had really bad migraine headaches growing up. I remember all night, you know, crying and vomiting on my own, and you know, being given any medication, and just seeing my friends and loved ones, you know, suffering with medical conditions and disabilities, and not getting any support. So those are people that suffered the most. I think the ones who are neurodiverse and the ones with disabilities and that needed the extra supports that just weren't there. And more so were actually shunned and punished. So, you know, like epilepsy was in possession. So, insanity. So, obviously that also led to no, you know, contraceptions. We never went to the doctors, and now I see it as a really much a control factor to stop us from getting those supports and, you know, potentially looking at the bruises or us talking to support and helpful people. So at the age of 19, I fell pregnant with my first son. And we were sent to Africa when he was a couple months old, which is obviously where every new mom wants to go, West Africa. So within a few months, he had meningitis. So once again, we were praying, putting olive oil on his head, humbly, until he slipped into a coma. And so we managed to get him to the hospital, like probably a couple days too late, which did save his life. But he does live with a lifelong brain injury now from that. And it's not the only one. There's a lot of people who live with lifelong disabilities from the lack of medical support. So this, I did leave at the age of 22 with a brand new baby. I remember looking down, distinctly seeing out of the the commune and thinking about my childhood and things that I'd suffered and thinking about my son and the life I was taking away from them and that this just said that intense maternal instinct sort of came over me. Like, I'm not gonna let them have that life. I'm not gonna give up that future for them. And I was like a woman possessed from that moment. Yeah, I couldn't do it for myself, but promise tears, though.
Was delivered.
More tissues up here. So there was a long, arduous journey that I'm not going to get into the details of, but I managed to become a registered psychologist. I've got a wonderful organization. Thank you. A wonderful organization now that works with people with disabilities, and that to them, cultic environments are their role, not the exception. They literally live under the cloak of control all the time. So we're super passionate in our organization about creating a world without coercion, a world where people's decisions are not made for people and then they have to live with the consequences for the rest of their lives of a decision that someone else made with them.
Yeah.
And it's about human rights, it's about self-sovereignty, it's about, using the bite model. We walk into like a place where, a home or something, and we can support people to have more, help people have more empowerment in their lives and human rights. So I feel really empowered about that myself. And then it was just only a couple of years ago, I think, probably with your movement that you started, that I started to see, like, I've done so much in other communities, why not our own? We're burying our loved ones, buried a brother, we all have, and now we're, watching just this epidemic. So I think that's what's kind of brought us all here today, to try to talk about the complexity of the SGA experience, the severe, intense barriers that we have to face, and how it's very different, I think, than your Netflix special, got in, got out, made a bunch of money. Like it's a lifelong, So yeah, segue. Boom.
Good job, Marietta.
Me. Right. Yeah, so I suppose just picking up those individual specific things that happen when you don't have a point of reference before, and I guess it takes an exceptional amount of effort to reach in and actually dig out of the tools that you need to overcome anything, even just the most basic of things, which I think is where bringing about like emotional safety, or coming to the point where you can see the world as a safe enough place, even though you don't have any proof of that. That's it's a huge undertaking for anybody, let alone someone without a point of reference. But the knowledge gap. So you come out, there is no life before. So it's not even just a knowledge gap, it's just a knowledge absence.
Yeah.
There's no I always hear the reintegration, that's when we're like, no no before, no begin again, it's all starting fresh.
So what happened was, through the people that have been coming to our speaking at our podcast, and especially the support groups that we're helping to facilitate, we were starting to hear over and over the same pleas of how do we get help that's specific to us? how come everybody is missing the mark? Several of us said, well, let's ask some questions, let's find out what's really going on. And so we conducted a community needs assessment, let's call it. Everybody, there was about 76 SGAs, MGAs that wanted to participate, that wanted to tell their story and have their voice heard about what the needs are. And so we put together a list of questions and different scenarios that people wanted to talk about. It was not conducted for publication or anything like that, but simply to put a group of voices together and come up with some of the needs and the questions that are out there and what they might be. Everyone that took part in this was born between the years of 1972 and 1997. As you can see there, it was with the different gender, nationalities, and the areas that they grew up in. There was quite a sporadic, quite a large, I guess, group, a large variety of where people were born and grew up. The majority of our gender was women that responded.
Representative.
Yeah. There you go. This is just a quick view of the majority of where people responded, where they're living.
So as you can see, most of us were separated from our parents as a child. It was just a matter of at what age. The youngest, some of the youngest, like we were talking yesterday, we would be given babies because the mothers would be having too many babies. So we'd be given babies to take care of until they were old enough to go into another group. And I was personally separated from my parents at 12 years old, and I didn't see my mother or any of my siblings again until I was 25 and having a baby. So that was a very typical thing in the cult, was to separate us from our parents, and I believe it's because it allows them to abuse us better without anybody really watching.
A history of broken families. So even just, well, put it this way, my dad, I saw him the last time I was 3, and then again when I was 36. I'm not entirely impressed with what I found, but and then essentially they used the pulling apart of families as power play, and there could be two people who really loved each other and had really wholesome family dynamic, and they could just go in there, play God, pluck you out, stick you somewhere else, say you are going to marry this person now, and it's it just plays into the chaos basically, because the family unit is one of the, again, we're talking about founding or building blocks and things that that help add stability, and so stability was not very good for their sales tactics, and so by pulling everything apart, making it as hectic as possible, it gave them more grounds to swoop in and say they created problems and then came up with supposed solutions.
Supposedly, allegedly. Mighty
So, I think this is quite generous. Saying that 18% of us had a high school certificate, but we were all homeschooled. And I think most of us can remember at a very, very young age, like the last day we did a little bit of homeschooling. But most of the school was really raising babies, making food, fundraising, making money for the group. So that obviously gives you very limited options to live in the real world when you can't have any education. That's a big part of, I think, why a lot of us struggle now. And You can see 40% of us are full-time employed. That's pretty crazy. There's some, obviously, a lot of us prefer working for ourselves. That's quite a common thing as well for us to kind of work for ourselves. So, yeah.
I thought it was the next one, but, one of the things that we did want to, we asked everyone was the questionnaire for adverse childhood experiences. Did you want to explain basis?
So if anyone who doesn't know, it stands for adverse childhood experiences. And in the general population, they say that the score of 4 or more will shorten your life by.
I think 6 is 20 years.
Yeah.
Less than.
So as you can see, the majority of us had 7, 8, 9. I personally have 10. As I told you about my parents being arrested for child abuse. And they used to smoke pot down in the basement when I was a child also. When they were, waiting for the group to tell them what to do again. So there was, as Maria was saying, the medical neglect was rampant. They would only take you to the doctor if they thought maybe you were dying. And even then it was iffy. And as you can see, most of our parents have been divorced multiple times. I personally had 5 dads before I turned 12. And then my mom had another partner after that. So it was six dads altogether. And I think that kind of speaks for itself as to the atrocities that were committed on to the children.
You can
No.
see the sexual abuse being like insane, 7.6%. Yeah, and a lot of physical force. I think the males got sometimes that significant, like extreme physical abuse. And yeah, as well as emotional, and then that neglect as well. So the numbers that we're dealing with are just astronomical in comparison to the average, population.
Yeah.
The only number that we all wish was different on there is the incarcerated relative.
Yeah. Not enough for incarcerated.
That needs to be a lot higher.
It should have been. And we're thinking, Jemima and Whisper make super cute little funny shirts. We're thinking about making a shirt out of 10 on the ace. Might be a bit nerdy for.
That's funny.
Yeah, this is just another image of how it's broken up, but overall 67, almost 68% of the respondents have an ACE score of 6 or higher, which is just really tragic numbers.
Tragic. Very tragic.
And I think the people that are most impacted wouldn't even have the capacity to fill in anything or even talk about their story. There's a lot of the saddest stories are the ones that aren't really being told.
Yeah, and I guess for me, it's also not so much about you can tell the depth of the tragedy. I think when you're highlighting the level of dysfunction, there's not too many stories are barely enough. But when you bring it into what moves forward, so these things roll into generations and generations, and it takes some very specific, purposeful effort to break those patterns. And we can see in the numbers there on relationships, so relational dysfunction, nearly 95%. It's not just women, for instance, that are in dysfunctional and abusive relationships. I've been in my fair share as well, and it's taken me this long to actually feel worthy of a partner that gives me love. As strange as that might sound, but it's just one of those things where always serving and always looking out for other people always comes, at a really high price. And self-sacrificing seems like the right thing to do. It makes sense, but it really isn't. So just, like the ability to trust others naturally. The faith one, I'm assuming there's like religion. It's one of the things in complex post-traumatic stress that is a green flag as far as the recovery process is understanding that you're a spiritual person without feeling like a need to follow a set of rules. But faith is a big one for a lot of people. They basically took God from you or your spirituality. They took your belief system and your belief structures away from you.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
it's kind of all the things that could help the community, the relationships, like all of those are triggers for us. So can be challenging and legal issues. A lot of us, we were actually raised to be criminals. No one ever paid taxes. We were always looking out, trying to sell things on the street. The police coming around there. And so we're seeing a lot of SGAs now, 30s, 40s, 50s, having serious, like, criminal charges and issues just from doing exactly the way we grew up. So we've got family members.
And
I have two brothers in prison.
I've had several myself, and ones with serious issues just from doing exactly the way we were taught, like that was socially what we were supposed to do at the time. And
so I suppose looking at the numbers, it's not so much to paint a picture of like how grossly horrible it was. It's more to give information to a forward-moving, project-specific based recovery and support system that where you can see that war-torn countries, for instance, refugees, actual child soldiers. So if you consider, the blood diamond African children that are actually, given firearms and made to shoot people, that's essentially inside like that level of feeling like a monster when you're out mingling. Once you're out, the fear of having children, I was terrified of having children because I didn't want to. I knew I was in increased risk of passing on abuses, and glad to say I'm actually a beautiful father. Yes. But yeah, I suppose I just wanted to paint that perspective, as this isn't about telling a horror story. It's about saying, expressing in numbers, and as informal as the process was, we have numbers that quite clearly state the level of support that's required, and then it has to go back to a grassroots thing, like opening bank accounts. There's just what it's like to pay rent. The fact that when you move into a house, you have to apply for electricity, get it turned on. Some of those really basic things, if you were just given one single job in the group, and that was it. The idea of having a job in the first place, like, that's in the system.
Yeah.
so many like working these kind of cash jobs and not really knowing taxes, and just like not just having no understanding about future retirement. I think thinking about a few years ahead is really hard for all of us. Just because we were very right here, right now, the world's ending. It's this constant chaos, and some of these things, like I heard a friend, like they didn't even put dad on the birth certificate, so now he can't get, he actually was thrown in jail for fraud. How can it be his fault, his birth certificate? But like the stupid decisions our parents made are like we're living with the consequences now.
Yeah.
So the understanding.
It's also just to make a mention in case I didn't make it clear earlier, even though we are all from the children of God, mainly because we know each other. But the people that wanted to participate in telling their stories and answering these questions are from multiple cults. It's not just the children of God. So these are stories that we hear from other survivors of cults as well.
Yeah.
For sure.
And especially things around areas around sense of self and confidence and well-being, and those things are just really, really heavily spoken about in, the different stories and discussions that were had.
Yeah, so I think there was, you could see like those massive mental and physical health impacts for all of us, 15% plus. Feeling that they had a disability, from the cult, this is actually what was impacted from. And then a lot of us having chronic health issues, which is quite, something, and a lot of us wouldn't even probably know because might not get diagnosed. Like I was at my dentist recently, so no saliva in my mouth, and that's actually not an immune thing, and that's got dental implications seriously. So there's a lot more, I think, than what we know, because I would never think of that as, health condition, but a huge percentage of us with mental illness, and even the ones that are like doing really well, have a lovely friend, working on the best companies in the world, traveling all the work around, and she just could not stop thinking about suicide. Like she was, even those of us that have been super successful, it's just this like chronic feeling. So addictions being a really big thing as well, and suicide ideation, I think, most people talk about a lot of chronic pain and health issues. Obviously from being in fight and flight all the time, but also from not getting them medical attention, and a lot of digestive issues. So many of us have insomnia, really, really hard. Tried everything. Would love more tips, but people always give you tips of, oh, I just have to have some exercise. Okay. Tried that one.
But when you've grown up in a world where not even your own bed is safe, sleep is not a friend, no matter what you do. So that's a constant struggle. with So
Yeah.
many of us.
Someone told me she would be at the end of a bed with little kids, and there was someone who was like jacking off on the bed or having sex or something, and she always felt like she had to take care of these little girls that were there, so she was always on high alert, and she couldn't ever rest, and so now she's got serious insomnia the rest of us. And then
Yeah, mental health has obviously been very impacted. Most of us have complex PTSD and a lot of mood disorders and anxiety disorders, and it's difficult to find mental health professionals that are well versed in trauma like this and cult recovery. They're few and far between.
I made this slide in particular because once I started seeing those numbers, I was like, what is it compared to the rest of the world?
It's pretty sad.
It's pretty bad. I think, yeah, this slide just speaks for itself of where the need is and how desperate.
Yeah, I guess if the general population is, I guess in therapists and things, I had a negative experience with therapy. First time I went was when I found that my partner was, my partner at the time was pregnant with the first child, and then identified the sex, and it was a girl. So I went straight to a counsellor to see how big a threat that I was, because I was just going to disappear. I was going to leave, go overseas, no one would ever find me again. But it was, and I landed from this person who ended up telling me that they'd abused their brother because their older brother abused her, and I felt in the end like I was actually counselling the counsellor. So that was, we're talking back in 2000. So, things have improved a little bit since then, maybe. But if the general population of therapists are working in this 23.1 and 22% zone, and then you've got 63.2, or some are perhaps okay with some of the baseline items. But when it comes to the complexity, unless you have a team of therapists, and let's face it, it's difficult enough to afford one, especially when there's a lot of like financial restrictions, even people without education opportunities are impacted. So I guess it's just one of those things where there's there really is, if there was a group or a society, for instance, of cultic informed, intense trauma informed therapists, that you know, I think that'd go a long way.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess, you know, that's part of the hope, is just sort of giving a more fleshed out, complete version of what.
We could kind of
What
jump
was the
probably into the solutions, because we're
Yeah.
getting, we're
Yeah.
slowing up.
We
Yeah.
only have 20 minutes. We want 10 minutes for questions and answers.
Yeah.
So we have 10 minutes.
You want to go to the do's and don'ts really quick? Since we get to
Yeah,
that. So do's and don'ts for therapists, this is what people have told us, has been helpful. You know, just lots and lots of listening, of course, before providing like tips and advice, and I think being really curious as well, like no assumptions. You know, there's just so many different types of groups and cults, and not just like giving a bunch of reading. A lot of us are neurodiverse. In fact, all of us. So giving big books to read, and you know, and doing a bit of reading up themselves on the particular cult, so they can understand it a little bit more, you know. Or if we send a little article or something, just look, it really helps just to get a bit that someone cares to understand your story a little bit more.
Yeah.
And you know, being lectured or in trouble, or you know, all of that, just have to remember therapy is a very triggering, can be very traumatic experience for us.
Yeah.
Because my friend had, you know, her brother died, she had broken up relationship, tons of domestic violence in her life, 17-year-old mum, you know, and she had gone to a therapist in the stuffy room, and you know, she's asking her the Spanish Inquisition questions, and she just said, I couldn't get out of that room fast enough. Like, she opted to get a yoni steam. I'll let you look it up on your own time. And get wrapped up in the baby, and which was really sad for me that she missed out on the actual ethical therapy with a trained professional.
Yeah.
So, you know, going out of the room, going for a walk, fresh air, sunshine and greenery, so you don't feel trapped. Being careful about those Inquisition style questions. Just think every time that we've been with someone like that, we've probably been beaten just before. So just thinking that that could be a very triggering sort of experience.
Yeah.
Also suggesting hospitalization or a treatment order. I've seen therapists do that quite often. Following up and saying, I've got a pretty complex history, and I had a friend the other day, oh, well, we'll just put you in the psychiatric ward. So don't tell a cult baby to that thing, you know, institutionalize them. And I've even gone to see friends in psychiatric ward. I'm fairly put under authorities. I'm a psychologist myself. I worked for years in the mental health system, so I understand how it works. But I had a friend sitting there that had actually been sexually assaulted, and then acting erratically, thrown into the psychiatric ward. And she had 3 men sitting across from her, asking her what matter. And they're like, you're not helping us help you. You have to tell us. And she's sitting there like silently. And obviously I had to come in and try to advocate for her and support her to get off this treatment authority. And that's quite a common experience as well, because we never learn to advocate for ourselves, stand up for ourselves. So we don't have a right to response or due process or anything. So a lot of times there's major consequences with the mental health systems, or the systems that are supposed to support us. Yeah.
In the current efforts, because we're not going to sit here and do nothing. There's a bit going down. There's you know, with Whisper and Jemima, and let you guys talk to your efforts.
Oh, yes, well, Whisper, you want to talk about this? I'll talk a little bit and you can. So what we have found very, very helpful has been peer-to-peer programs and peer-to-peer support groups. because like I always say, it's the difference is like, would you rather fly with someone who's been in a flight simulator 100 times? Or would you rather fly with someone who's actually piloted a plane 100 times? And my answer every time is gonna be the one who's actually done it, because they have life experience. So I believe that's why the peer-to-peer support groups have been so beneficial for us, because it's not somebody sitting there telling you what you should do and how you need to act, and well, this is gonna help and that's gonna help. We all just sit and listen and support each other. And of course, we do share things that have helped for us, but it's in a very, you know, I don't know if this will work for you, it's been helpful for me type of thing, not in a, oh, you should try this, you should do this, or you should do that. Because cult babies just don't like that. They just don't like being told what to do or how to act, especially. So I believe that's why our peer-to-peer support has been so helpful. Yeah.
And with also other people from other groups, I think you were saying, not just. The
Yeah,
one
that
cult,
was a
because
very big
sometimes
thing.
we go
Yeah.
to the same patterns that you're used
Yeah.
to, so actually
Yeah.
having external.
Yeah. So between definitely between the four of us here, I mean, these are all things that we have personally been involved in trying to help and move things forward, as well as several people that we know. So I mean, this is just our personal current efforts outside of what the need is. We do have the redress in Australia.
So Joey and I were in some articles that actually came out on David Berg's birthday.
Oh, my.
On the 18th of February, which was always
Great timing.
like a fast week. We were always like drinking on cubes and water. Anyway, long story. Cult leaders love their birthday to be a week of celebration. Big red flag. So yeah, so the Australian government has actually agreed to be a funder of last resort, they call it, because a lot of organizations like the Catholic Church and big organizations have actually gone into this fund where they have to pay sort of a fine, and then they can pay the people who have.
So the drag there really.
Yeah, so
In
they're-
on
yeah.
purpose.
So, people that experienced sexual abuse, so obviously there was lots of different types, but that was very. So we actually had like a legal organization fighting for us, and the government has put that in, and so it's $150,000. Therapy and up to, therapy, and then also legal support.
Sounds wonderful.
So dream solution for sure.
Right.
For all
Seriously.
survivors, but
Obviously,
at least it's been started somewhere. That's
Yeah,
what I think
exactly.
about it.
Exactly.
and honestly, the therapy is probably more important.
This is the Butterflies and Bravery podcast that Jemima and I started. And it's been something that has created a really strong and powerful community. A lot of the people that have come on the podcast have ended up in our support groups as well. And it's what's different, and there are some podcasts that are out there. There's a few for sure. We're not the only one, but what is really powerful about it is that it's I mean, the way that we put it is we hand the mic to the survivor and say, tell whatever you want to tell. And there's very few times that survivors have been able to do that, and just that has been such an empowering tool for them. It's something that it's small, but we hope to be able to keep going as long as possible.
Yeah.
It's self-funded, so
Right.
we'll do our best.
Our passion project.
Yeah, the board and support groups that we've been helping facilitate that have been tremendously successful. Some of the things that we sat down with the other facilitators and talked about that has made it so successful has been that it's peer facilitated, that it's SGA, MGA only, and also that there's multiple cult origins. It's not just one cult, and being able to come together like that and see the similarities, the struggles that we share, has been extremely empowering. The participants are vetted and screened before they join, just to make sure that everybody's ready to be in that type of support group. And that we have a community style shared facilitating as well. So that's been some of the key ways that the support groups that have been successful. And I mean, we hear over and over and over from the people that are in it. It's just that it's been something that has kept them holding on sometimes even. So it's been an honor and a privilege and a dream to be able to find a way to replicate some of this as to what's been happening. That's really a next step for what we hope to have to be able to do personally, and with the Butterflies and Bravery podcast. And then lastly is just some of the programs that we've created. I have a 14-week trauma-informed recovery and restorative program called Self-Designed Life. Where I actually have a cohort happening right now. So that's been really, really exciting, and hopefully that we can have more cohorts soon. And then also
I haven't done anything yet. I keep saying with the eventually, but we've got Dr. Jenkinson, Gilly coming in to Australia. We're really excited about. We're doing like a recovery workshop over the weekend. And then I'm doing the training as well. So hopefully, and that's with KIPS, the Cult Information Family Services. And I've done recovery workshops with them for the last 3 years or so, helping to facilitate that as well. So we find those really beneficial.
Yes.
Getting everyone together for a weekend in person, which is really nice, not IRL.
Baseball.
Cool.
Questions?
So anyone
All right.
have
Any
questions?
questions?